I want to talk on this subject, how to be a leader that people love to follow. Now, I think one of the reasons I teach on that is, Sonny, you and Cam are leaders that people love to follow. I know that. They love you. They love your leadership. They love how you not only know the way and go the way, but you really kind of show the way as a leader. And so when I thought about you and what you're trying to accomplish, I thought about this subject, but then I have to admit to you that when I teach this today, it becomes very personal to me. And let me just give you the context and explain it. My father passed away on July the 4th, okay? He was 98 and a half years of age. An amazing man, an amazing leader. And so when I'm working on this subject of what is it about a leader that people love to follow him or her, I immediately began to think of my dad. And I began to think about the fact that he was very successful in life and was a college president for 20 years. And he just, as a leader, just inspired people, and they loved him and they loved to follow him. I love to follow him. He was my lifelong mentor. And so I'm kind of dedicating this lesson, if it's okay with you, I'm dedicating it to my dad. And in so doing, there'll be a few times I'll maybe pull out a story of Dad to share with you of how he was that type of leader that people love to follow. And of course, my goal is to teach this in such a practical, simple way that you become a leader that people love to follow you. Because if you think about it, just think about it for a moment. Think about all of your work experiences, okay? As you really give it thought, haven't there been leaders in your life that they just inspired you and lifted you, and you could pretty much just hardly wait to get to work because you knew when you got to work that good things were going to happen and relationships were strong. And we all know people that we just love to follow. And then is it not true that in our experiences we've also had leaders that we didn't love to follow? We probably had leaders that we didn't love. We probably had leaders that didn't love us. So what does it take? What does it take to be a leader that people love to follow? That's what I want to talk to you about today. Now, I start this lesson by a survey. It's a fairly recent survey. 4,000 people. In this survey were people that were leaders, supervisors, bosses, okay? And there were also people that were not. They were just on the team. And so it went out, and the survey asked one question, and the question was, what do you think is the best way to improve yourself as a leader? Now, what makes this survey interesting to me is that the leaders answered the question differently than the followers. In fact, the two groups weren't even close. The leaders, the people that were supervisors, they said, well, to improve our leadership, we need to be better in technology, and we need to be better in finances. Now, I'm going to call a timeout right now because I know I'm talking to ITT Design and customers, clients, and friends. And I know technology is your world. So when I give you this survey illustration, in fact, I was kind of amused when I thought about putting it in here, thinking about you, and maybe one of the ways for you to improve your leadership is technology. So I want to be careful here, but please just give me a little space. So let me have a little bit of fun. This survey wasn't to a technology company, and basically they were asking the leaders how they could improve their leadership, and they said technology and a better understanding of finances. When they asked the people that were on the team that were not in leadership positions, what do the leaders of your company need to do to improve their leadership? They gave two total different answers. They said, first of all, they need to become better leaders. They need to increase their leadership skills. And secondly, they need to have greater emotional intelligence. Now, I'm going to call a timeout here because we've already got a problem before I ever even dive into the lesson. And the problem is very simple. The leaders and the team players aren't on the same page. But it's been my understanding in leadership for years as I've helped companies and done my very best to lift the leadership lid. It's been my understanding for years that very seldom Are the leaders and the followers on the same page? And I say that because I think one of the major mess-ups in leadership is what I call assumptions. In fact, I say assumptions is the mother of all mess-ups. And assumptions, the assumption gap is the gap between what I think is true and what is truly true. But what do I think? Does it match the reality? You know, Max Dupree said the first responsibility of a leader is to define reality. And what I find is that many leaders lead by assumption. They think they know where their people are. They think they know what the people need. And it's not true at all. And so I share that with you because this survey was certainly a billboard for assumption, because the leaders said, well, the way we can improve our leadership is through technology and through finances, and the people on the team, the other side said, no, you can improve your leadership by becoming a better leader, and you can improve your leadership by becoming emotionally intelligent. And by the way, when they said improve your leadership, basically, leadership asks the question, where are you taking me? And emotional intelligence asks the question, how are you treating me? And basically, the people on the team, they said, where are you taking us? And how are you treating us? And I think this is just such an important lesson for me. I hope it's an important lesson for you. And by the way, the title of the lesson is How to Be a Leader That People Love to Follow. It is not entitled How to Be a Leader That People Love. I'm not talking about a popularity contest. I am talking about respect. But respect is always earned on difficult ground. And in our social media culture, where we want to know how many likes we have, we're developing a whole bunch of leaders that aren't leaders at all. They basically are poll takers. So what I'm going to share with you really, really works. So I asked myself, if I'm following a leader that I love, what do I feel? What are my feelings? When I describe that leader that I love to follow, what comes from my heart? Why is it that I love him so much? And I think that there are three feelings that followers always have if they have a leader that they love. And let me give you those three feelings, and then let me teach. I think that if you follow a leader that you love, you always feel valued. I think that's at the core. If I'm following a leader that I love, I can tell you for a fact that I feel valued by that leader. Secondly, I think I feel inspired. There's something lifting about their leadership that I'm inspired when I'm around them. I've had mentors like that. John Wooden, who was the great coach at UCLA, mentored me for several years. And I said, it's wonderful what the coach says, but it's more wonderful just to experience the coach. He inspired me. And I think when you follow a leader that you love, you not only feel inspired and valued, I think you feel empowered. So the question is, how do we develop a culture where people feel valued, inspired, and empowered? That's the question. It's a great question. Think about it for a moment. If in your company, those three feelings consistently exist, people are feeling valued, they're feeling inspired, they're feeling empowered, wouldn't you say that you had a great culture? So what kind of a leader creates that culture? Because I want to say something I think that is very important. When people join a company, when they become a part and they're hired or employed into an organization, it's the company that usually hires them. So they're brought in by the company. But when people leave an organization or a company, they don't leave an organization, they leave a leader. Always. It's a leader that either didn't value them, didn't inspire them, or didn't empower them. That when they leave the company, they don't leave the company, they leave a person. And so it's very important for you and I to know how to have those characteristics and qualities that we are leaders that people just love to follow in our life. So how do I Have the people on my team always feel valued, inspired, and empowered. Let's go. Number one, as leaders, we need a heart to care. If we have a heart to care, this will convey value to our people. Maya Angelou, who was an author, a philosopher, a thinker, a speaker, I'll bet every one of us in this room today have either read something or been inspired by something that Maya said or wrote. It was my privilege, maybe 10 or 11 years ago, in Boston to do a conference with her. And I was so excited because I admired her so much, and she lived up to all of her reputation. She was a great lady. It was Maya Angelou who said, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. She is so right on target. We may forget what a person said. We may even forget what they did, but we will always remember how that leader made us feel. And when I thought about that statement, and when I thought that leaders have a heart to care and they value the people that they lead, I thought, okay, let me see if I can get this as solid as I possibly can, so you can get your hands on it and your feet can stand on it, and it will really hold you. It's good and secure. So let me see if I can help you. I think there are 4 words that show that you have a heart to care. I think there are 4 words that show that I have a heart to care. And the 4 words are these: I notice you matter. Those are the 4 words that if we express them often enough, if we live them often enough, trust me, the people around us will feel valued. Again, I said earlier, I think that when people leave an organization, they don't leave the organization, they leave the leader, and they leave the leader many times because they don't feel valued. When I have one of my team members around me, especially when they're kind of new to me and I haven't been with them very long, I let them know how much I value them. In fact, I tell them that the very fact that they're on my team, I put a 10 on their head. And what I learned a long time ago is we view people by the way we value people. You see, if I value you as important, I view you as important. Our values of people and our views of people never separate. It's not, I don't view you as unimportant as if I value as important. The values and the views have to come together. And I tell them all the time, I say, I put a 10 on your head. In fact, I tell people, the only way that the 10 can ever be removed is if you take it off. If you make a decision to take a 10 off and put a 5 on, then I'll have to live with your decision. But my decision is to see you as you can become, to value you and your potential, to put a 10 on your head. That's my choice. But when I say to you, I notice, and you matter. I just want you to know, I've noticed that what you're doing over there in the department, and I tell you, it matters, and you matter. There's something that is just absolutely uplifting by those 4 words. And somebody asked me the other day, said, well, how do I show that I notice and I matter? And the answer to you is very simple. Appreciate a person more than you think they should be appreciated. Value a person more than you think they should be valued. See a person higher than they can see themselves. You see, it's wonderful when people believe in their leader, but it's even more wonderful when the leaders believe in their people. And when you begin to up your appreciating people as far as your exercises, in other words, when you feel like, boy, I've really shown appreciation to that person, double it. Boy, I've really shown appreciation to that department. Double it. That's how you know that they know that they matter and that you notice them. My dad, going to my dad now, and I'm doing this lesson in honor of him. And by the way, so many of you wonderful folks, I had a lot of people say, well, wow, I'm sorry you lost your dad. And I just want you to know that I didn't lose him because I know where he is. He was a person of faith. He's with his Father. He's with his Heavenly Father. I know exactly where he is. I didn't lose him. You see, you only lose a person if you don't know where they are. But he did leave me. But he left me with so many incredible teachings and memories. And one of the things that I'll never forget when you talk about valuing people is when my father was president of Ohio Christian University. By the way, that was my first university. That was my first college. And I went there because Dad was president. And I thought, hey, if you really want to get through school, go to where your dad's the president. You just increase the odds. And so anyway, one of my favorite times to be with Dad would be during college year. And my father would be in the offices, and he knew when the maybe the major break is between classes. And he always would, when he knew that there was going to be students moving across the campus, if possible, he went out on the campus himself. And he would say to me, sometimes I'd be there with him, he'd say, son, let's go. The kids are about to leave their classes and walk across the campus and go with me. And I knew what that meant. That meant that he was going to walk slowly through the crowd, that he was going to walk slowly through the student body. And he knew them by name, and when they would pass, he would call them by name, and he would say, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Are you adjusting okay to school? How are your classes? And he would get a conversation going with them. He called it walking slowly through the crowd. And it could take him, 30 minutes to walk 50 yards, because he wanted the students to know that he noticed them and they mattered. And in that conversation, he always would ask this question. He would say, is there something I can do to help you? And sometimes, not all the time, not even most of the time, but sometimes a student might say, well, yes, and they might share a thought with him or something he could do to help them. And my dad always carried a 3x5 card in his pocket. He'd reach in his pocket, he'd pull out that 3x5 card, and with a pen, he'd write down the student's name and what he needed to do to help that student. And then he'd say, now I'll go make sure that you get that help. And he'd have a list. And when the students all went back to class, he would go back and get his staff together and say, okay, this student needs this. A student could use some help here. And my dad was just amazing. And the students, knowing that Dad would be on the campus, were looking for him. And it would start with a couple or one or two, and sometimes there was no walking slowly through the crowd at all. It was just standing in the crowd, because they would gather around him. And for maybe 5-8 minutes, he'd hold court and say, I notice and you matter. So to apply this first thought to our lives, the question I have for you is, do your people notice that they matter to you? And how do you know that they know that? And what do you do that makes them know that? And maybe even more important, what are you going to do this week to say to the people on your team, I notice and you matter? In other words, I have a heart to care. I value you. The second thing that leaders do really well, they do this really well. Again, that this characteristic it just gives love to the people that follow. Leaders, as leaders, we need a passion to inspire our people. And I choose the word inspire very carefully, because there's another word I use a lot in in leadership, and it's the word motivate. In fact, I wrote a book just recently on the leader's greatest return, and I have a whole chapter on the 7 motivations of people that leaders need to know so that they can lead people best. But instead of saying that we need a passion to motivate people, I said we need a passion to inspire. Let me just give you, it's a small difference, but let me give you the difference between motivating people, which we have to do as leaders. We have to move them. and inspiring people. When I motivate people, that implies to a certain extent that I'm pushing you. Not pushing you aggressively, but I'm slowly nudging and pushing you to do something that perhaps you don't want to do, okay? I'm kind of working from the outside to get you to do something perhaps on the inside. There's a gentle push, okay? I'll explain that in a moment. And when I inspire you, instead of pushing, I'm pulling. I motivate you, I push you. When I inspire you, I pull out of you stuff that is already within you, things that you naturally can do or are good at, but you just need to be led to do it. So get the fine difference between the two. Because the question I think as leaders we have often is, when do I push and when do I pull? I have, in fact, I had a very well-known college basketball coach ask me that question when I was mentoring him recently. He said, John, when do I push my players? When do I pull my players? Well, you push your players, your team. Remember, that's motivating. When they need to do things that they're required to do in their job. I mean, there are some things that they don't like to do in their job, just like there are some things you don't like to do in your job. So you have to kind of be pushed to maybe do the things that we don't like to do. You push in the area of teamwork because some people don't want to play team ball. I think you sometimes have to push in the area of servanthood because some people don't naturally want to serve. I think always with culture, with values, with vision, there's a constantly pushing them in front of making sure that whatever is, they need to be kind of gently persuaded to go that way. The flip side of it is what do I pull out of people? What do I inspire people to do? I pull out their strengths. I pull out their natural gifts and their temperament. I pull out their motivations, the things that kind of motivate them. I pull out their passion. I pull out their purpose. In other words, when I inspire people, I kind of reach inside of you and I pull out of you things that you are naturally inclined to do, but may not do if I don't lead well. And the word passion, the leaders that people love to follow, they have a passion to inspire people. I love that because that passion means that they energize you, they maximize you. This is huge. When I teach mentoring, one of the lessons I teach, I think that's so helpful to people is who mentors you is as important as what they say. Now, what they say is that incredible knowledge and information, insights that you need to have in a mentoring relationship. But the contagiousness of mentoring is in the who. As I said earlier about Coach John Wooden, better than hearing what John Wooden had to teach, you just experienced John Wooden. And I left feeling inspired. You see, I learned a long time ago, big people always make you feel bigger. By the way, small people always make you feel smaller. Remember Mary Angelou who said, Maya Angelou who said, people, you're not going to remember what they said, you're not going to remember what they did, but you are going to remember how they made you feel. And so when my father passed away, a couple days before he passed away, I spent alone with him for a few hours. And at this time, he couldn't respond at all to me. But as you know, when people are dying, listening, they can hear. That sense stays with them longer than the other. And so I sat beside Dad, and on my iPhone, I began to put down the lessons that my dad had taught me. And every time I'd put a lesson down, I'd stand up and put my hand maybe on his face or his head or his shoulder and just love on him. And I'd say, Dad, you taught me this lesson. When I finished my hours with him that day, the last day I had with him while he was still alive, I had put in my iPhone 29 lessons that my dad taught me. And if you go to, johnmaxwell.com, I think you can get those lessons. I teach them. I think I've taught them in 4 consecutive weeks on tribute to my dad or my father. You may be able to pick them up. I hope you can. 29 lessons. Here's the point. Every one of those lessons, he not only taught me those lessons through his words, he showed me those lessons through his actions. In fact, his actions weighed more heavily than his words. He lived all of the lessons for me to see. That's important because people do what people see. So the question, if you're going to be a leader that people love to follow, are you inspiring them? Are you inspiring them by your example? Can you do what a great leader always does? Look at the people that you lead and say, follow me. And they gladly get up and follow you because there's an inspirational quality there in your life. So the question that I have to ask about myself, and you need to ask about yourself, is very simple. What am I doing to inspire my team? How do I inspire my team? Do my team members feel inspired? Have I asked them, do I inspire you? And what can I do right now to inspire my people? Okay, let's go to the third thing that leaders do very well that cause their followers to love to follow them. And that is that we need a willingness to empower people. Now, this is a lesson in itself, and I only have a few minutes with it and for it, but I want to contrast empowerment, releasing people to reach their capacity and help the company reach its capacity. There's the opposite of empowerment is command and control. And I just want you to know that insecure people love command and control. Anybody that is insecure wants to have their hands on everything and they control everything. And I just want you to know that if you're a command and control person, there's a limitation to the growth of your company, always, not sometimes, always, because it will only grow to the level that you can personally command and control. And the moment that you have to release that to someone else, you get a problem. So you can't have constant continual growth and command and control at the same time. You got to make a decision. If I'm going to have that constant growth, then I have to be an empowering leader. I do a lot of work internationally. I think last year I was maybe 30 countries. I do a lot of work internationally, and one of the weaker parts of leadership internationally so many times is that leaders delegate tasks, but they don't delegate authority. And let me just say this, it's quite simple. If you delegate tasks, you'll never develop leaders. You'll just develop followers. And I see it happen all the time, because you give them a job to do, they go do it, and they come back, and you give them another job, and they do it, and they come back, and then you give them another job. All you're doing is you're developing a follower. They come back and go out, come back. To be honest with you, it's like playing fetch with your dog. I mean, you get a ball and you throw the ball out, the dog goes, runs after it, gets it, comes back, gives it to you, throw it back out, dog comes back, throw it back out, dog comes back. Most leaders, that's how they run their business. They're just delegating tasks and next, and they're just busy delegating tasks. And all they got is a bunch of followers. You see, if you want to develop leaders, you got to delegate authority. And that's how leaders get established. I began to think about this because I think empowerment is difficult for a lot of people. So in doing this lesson, I just wrote down, because of time, 3 empowerment indicators. Let me give them to you. How do you know that you are an empowering leader? I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can know that you are. 1, the only decisions you make are the decisions only you can make. That's very insightful. You see, decisions should be made at the lowest level possible in an organization, not the highest level possible in the organization. If you're making all the decisions, you're not an empowering leader. And so you begin to share those decisions with others. Another empowerment indicator is that team members are always creating ideas and opportunities. In other words, you're not the only one that's creating the opportunities. I run into leaders sometimes say, boy, if I don't make it happen, nothing happens. Can I tell you something? If you're one of those people that it only happens if you make it happen, you're not an empowering leader. Your people ought to have that authority to create, make mistakes, and try again. Thirdly, trust is the foundation of an empowering leader. That an empowering leader trust his or her people. And again, I run into people that say, well, how can you know if you can trust your people? And I always smile because that's a simple question to answer. My name's John, I'm your friend. It's this simple. The best way to find out if you can trust a person is to trust a person. And what you're going to discover by their actions is if they're trustworthy or not. And by the way, if you don't trust someone, you're either too controlling and haven't given up that trust, or you've got the wrong person, which means you've got to make a change. You've got to either change from command and control to empowerment, or you got to change the person because they're the wrong one. I am so excited today to share with you in this message about Jesus, who was an amazing transformational leader. Many times when I'm doing business secular conferences, we'll do Q&A and people will ask me, they'll raise their hand, they'll say, John, who was the greatest leader that ever lived? Now, I'm a person of faith, you know that. And I will, when that question is asked, I will say to the people that ask the question, I'm a person of faith. So maybe I'm a little biased, maybe I'm a little prejudiced. I don't think so, but I think Jesus was the greatest leader that has ever lived. And I think that's more than just a Christian perspective. I think that's a history perspective. When you take this one person who took 12 unlikely people and made a team out of them, and then has literally had, since that time, billions of followers, you have to say that, yeah, if leadership is influence, which that's what it is, then Jesus perhaps was the greatest leader that ever lived. But I'm going to also say to you, he's not only the greatest leader that ever lived, he's the greatest transformational leader that ever lived. And when I define transformational leader, because that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, how Jesus was a transformational leader and how you can be also transformational in your leadership. We're going to talk all about it here today. But when I talk about transformational leaders, these are men and women who are changed people, and they change people. Now, I can still remember being in Las Vegas, and I was speaking at a convention, and in a conversation with a very well-known leader, I was asking him about transformational movements, and he said to me, he said, all transformational movements begin with a transformational leader. In other words, you have to be transformed yourself to be able to be a change agent to help other people transform also. You see, transformational leaders, they influence people to think, speak, and act in such a way that it makes a positive difference, not only in their life, but in the lives of others. And so my friend Jim Collins at that lunch in Vegas was right on when he said to have transformational movement in a community or in a country, you have to start with transformational leaders. And so this lesson today is about Jesus, an incredible transformational leader. And what's going to be beautiful is we're going to learn from him how he helped change people, and we're going to be able to apply that to our life. And I promise you, by the end of my lesson today, if you want, you can take a step upward like you've never taken before, and you can go from a trained leader to a transformational leader. Let's have at it. What do you say? Let's see how Jesus became a transformational leader, and then let's see if we can apply it to our life. Let's go. The first thing I want to talk to you about as Jesus as a transformational leader is this. He saw things that others did not see. This is about vision. One of the things I teach is the fact that leaders, they see more than others see, and they see before others see. This is true with Jesus. One day he was walking with his disciples, and here are the words that he said to them. As you look around right now, wouldn't you say that in about 4 months it will be time to harvest? They're looking out at the fields. And he's saying, well, I'm telling you to open your eyes and take a good look at what's right in front of you. These Samaritan fields are ripe. It's harvest time. In other words, Jesus said, if you look at the grains today from human eyes, you'd say, well, 3 or 4 months and there'll be a harvest here. He's saying, I want you to look through transformational eyes. I want you to see more. I want you to see before, and you'll see an entirely different picture. You see, there are some people, when they look at things, they see them as they are. You know, the difficulties, the problems, the issues. Life's tough. So when some people, when they look at things as they are, and they ask themselves why is life so difficult? Why is life so tough? And when they ask the why, I call that the little why, and I call it the little why because if you see from the eyes of most people, what you do is you see the problems. But there is another group of people. They're transformational leaders. And they look at things as they could become. And they ask the question, why not? Why not make those changes? Why not move ahead with possibility thinking? You see, their why is a big why. They see the possibilities. Now, 2 different groups of people look at the same situation, and some people have the little why and see the problems, and some people, they have the big why, and they see the possibilities. You see, transformational leaders look beyond the problems, and Jesus is an example of that. And the reason I share that with you today is that when opportunity comes to you or me, it's not blatant. There's not a neon sign that flashes on and off saying opportunity is here, don't miss this, knock on this door right now. No. Almost all opportunities, almost all great possibilities, almost anything that has potential to it, really, is wrapped up in a problem, a challenge, a difficulty, an adversity. You see, those possibilities are disguised with problems. And transformational leaders, they see the problem, but they also see the possibility. You see, we see things not as they are. We don't see people as they are. We don't see situations as it is. We don't see things as you are and people are, and as we see things as we are. So when I want to have a better vision, a bigger vision, I don't try to change the outward situation. I change the inward situation. Transformational leaders, they just see things that others do not see. Now, could everyone see them? Of course they could, but it's a choice. The second thing about Jesus is he not only saw things that others did not see, he said things that others did not say. Now, this made him extremely attractive. He attracted, when he was on earth, throngs of people by the thousands. And the reason they flocked to him so quickly and wanted to hear what he was going to say, and they listened to his words and watch him, the reason people just thronged to be with Jesus is because he valued them. And they knew he cared for them, that he valued them as they were. And when people realize that you value them, they will get to you as quickly as possible. So Jesus was very attractive because he valued people. He was very attractive not only because of that, he was very attractive because of his message. His message was about hope and healing and mercy and grace and forgiveness. It was about transformation, and people longed to hear the good news. And so Jesus, his words, what he said, just attracted the people. I mean, words such as this. Jesus said, I'm a doctor who could help sick people. So you see, if you weren't well, you'd immediately come to Jesus. He said he was a doctor. He said, I'm the bread of life. If you come to me, he said, you won't hunger anymore. He said, anyone who drinks of me, the water that I give them, they're never going to thirst again. He said, I'm living water. He said words like, I came that you could have life and have it more abundantly. He came so that you could have a better life than you ever dreamed of having before. He said, as I am lifted up, I'm going to draw all people unto me. He said, I'm the way. He said, I'm the truth. I'm the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. You see, Jesus said things that were so attractive. I mean, when he said, I'm the way, without me, there's no going. I'm the truth, without me, there's no knowing. I'm the life, without me, there's no living. I mean, Jesus, he said things that no one ever said before him. And it made him extremely attractive. He valued people, and his message was one of hope. And they just longed to hear his words. They hung on to everything that he said. He was so beautifully attractive, so wonderfully different. In fact, one day, Jesus was teaching, and some children were playing. And, with a crowd, you always have children. And they were playing around the feet of Jesus, and the disciples kind of thought maybe the children were distracting from the message, and they kind of went over and tried to move the children out of the way, and Jesus stopped and said, no, let them stay. Let them stay right here. In fact, he said, you have to become like a little child to come into the kingdom of God. In other words, he said, you have to come to me with simplicity of faith. You have to come to me with openness and vulnerability. What Jesus said was so amazing. I can remember when I graduated from college, that night of graduation, Dad and I and the family were having dinner, and I asked Dad, I said, well, I'm getting ready to start my, ministry. And what words of advice do you have for me? And he said, John, he said, every day, I want you to value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love people. He said, if you'll do those three things, you'll be attractive. People will want to be around you because the people want to feel valued. They want people to believe in them. He said, hardly anyone is unconditionally loved. He said, do those three things. You'll attract people to you. Well, I've tried to do those for 50 plus years. I've tried to do those things. But I've tried to say those things in my lessons. I've tried to write those things in my books. Every time I write, every time I talk, I use that wonderful example that my father gave. Value the people, believe in the people, unconditionally love the people. That's what a transformational leader looks like. He sees things others do not see. He says things that others do not say. But let's look at Jesus again. Thirdly, I would like you to see that Jesus, he believed things. He believed things that no one else believed. Here I'm reading again from John chapter 8 out of the Message. Jesus said, you're tied down. He's talking to the people that he was teaching. You're tied down to the mundane. I'm in touch with what is beyond your horizons. You live in terms of what you see and what you touch. I'm living on other terms. Jesus' belief in people was so attractive. His faith in the possibility and potential of others, so appealing to others. I mean, what did he do? He looked at fishermen. I mean, just common, everyday fishermen. And he believed that they could become leaders. In fact, he said, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. I know you've been catching fish in this boat, but he said, you're going to go to a whole different level. His belief in ordinary people, fishermen, that allowed him to call them and attract them to a lifetime of ministry. Jesus looked at Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was kind of the town crook. He kind of cooked the books, okay? And everybody knew that if Zacchaeus was around you, he was taking you for something. He was a little guy, and he climbed up a tree, and Jesus was coming into the town one day, looked up the tree, saw Zacchaeus, and he believed Zacchaeus could be honest. In fact, he said, let's go to your house and let's have lunch together. The crowd couldn't imagine Jesus associating with this crook. But you see, Jesus saw more than Zacchaeus, the crook. He saw Zacchaeus transformed and changed in what he could become. Jesus looked at Lazarus, believed that he could be raised from the dead. He looked at the Samaritan woman. I mean, a woman that honestly, she was 5 marriages, living with a guy that wasn't her husband. Society really looked down on her, and he looked at her, and he saw her at the well, and he believed that she was a person of value. Jesus looked at the sick and believed they could be healed. He looked at the thief on the cross and believed that he could be forgiven. My father was long-distance mentored by Norman Vincent Peale, the Power of Positive Thinking author and writer. And I just want you to know that it was Jesus, not Norman Vincent Peale, that said anything is possible to a person that believes. It was Jesus, not Robert Schuller, who said everything is possible with God. It was Jesus, not Tony Robbins, who said, if you have a mere kernel of faith, there is nothing you will not be able to tackle. You see, Jesus believed the possibilities, and then he found people that would make them possible. It was all because of his huge belief in people. I call this action attraction. There's a belief that you have in what you're doing, and if you believe in who you are and you believe in what you're doing, all of a sudden, everything because of this belief system begins to change. Your eyes will see things that'll make a difference, and your mind will think things that'll make a difference, and your heart will feel things that'll make a difference, and your mouth will say things that'll make a difference, and your hands, they'll do things that'll make a difference, and your life will attract people who will make a difference. Transformational leaders believe that they can make a difference. And when you believe that you can make a difference, there is always an answer. Okay, Jesus, the transformational leader, he not only believed things others did not believe, he not only said things others did not say, he not only saw things that others did not see. Fourthly, Jesus felt things that others did not feel. He was an incredible man of passion and envy. I'm often known by a quote that I started saying earlier in my career: people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, that's Jesus. He felt things others did not feel. You see, a different world cannot be built by indifferent people. In my book, Change Your World, I talk about the fact that hope, in fact, when you open the Change Your World book, right, the very first page, it says, hope has 2 beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger, the way things are, and courage to make a difference. When I was a freshman in college, I can still remember, it was a Psych 101 class, that we had a visiting professor one day, and that visiting professor had a very simple talk, but it was a life-changing talk. And I didn't realize it because I was a freshman, but I wrote down what he said, and it became life-changing to me. He said there are 3 questions that every person needs to ask himself or herself. And he gave us those 3 questions, and I was sitting in my psych class, and I wrote them down that day. He said, the first question is, what do you sing about? What makes you happy? He said, the second question is, what do you cry about? What makes you sad? And the third question is, what do you dream about? What do you really want to accomplish? Now, I wrote those 3 things down in Psych 101 class, and to be honest with you, I didn't have the maturity to really value those questions like I do today. I mean, back then when he asked me what I sang about, it was the fact that, you know, the good-looking girl that I wanted to take out for a date on the weekend said yes, and what do I cry about is
The second time I asked her, she said no. And so what do I dream about is maybe she'll change her mind again. My thoughts were not really great thoughts. You understand, they were quite immature. But as I graduated from college and I began to try to really make a difference in this world and feel things that others did not feel, boy, those three questions, what do you sing about? What do you cry about? What do you dream about? They became very important to me. And today I sing about the fact that people learn good values and their life is transformed. I cry about the fact that so many people never have the opportunity to learn those values and to live them. And so therefore they live a substandard life that really, if somebody could have just helped them and shown them, it would have made such a difference. But what do I dream about? I dream about nations being transformed through good values. Now, I feel all those things. That's where my passion goes. That's where my energy comes from. That's what transformational leaders do. They get involved because they want to make a difference. So Jesus, he said things others did not say. He was attractive. He was contagious. He saw things others did not see. He was an incredible visionary. He believed things others did not believe. He was totally full of faith. And he felt things others did not feel. He was passionate about who he was and what he was doing. And number 5, one more thing. He did things that others did not do. He had an incredible, fruitful, successful life. And his fruitfulness was a result of 2 things: his life-changing message and his commitment to develop leaders. His life-changing message helped people become transformed, but his commitment to developing leaders allowed his legacy to continue 20 centuries later. Both of these are essential in your life, that we have a life-changing message and we are developing leaders to pass that message on. Okay, now I'm coming to the incredible good news. The good news is this. Jesus, the transformational leader, wants you to also be a transformational leader. And I know you're saying, oh my gosh, John, okay, talk to me about that. I mean, that's kind of big. I know that you're talking about Jesus, and I got that part. He was amazing. He was God. But are you saying, John, that Jesus looks to me and wants to give me the strength, the empowerment, and believes in me enough to say that I can be a transformational leader also? I'm saying exactly that. On the screen, you're going to now see this scripture verse, and it's just life-changing. It's Jesus talking, okay? And here's what he said. The person who trusts me will not only do what I'm doing, but even greater things. Because I, on my way to the Father, am giving you the same work to do that I've been doing. You can count on it from now on. Whatever you request along the lines of who I am and what I'm doing, I'll do it. That's how the Father will be seen for who he is in the Son. I mean it. Whatever you request in this way, I'll do it. Now, I'm sitting down, you're sitting down. It's a good thing because this just blows me away. When Jesus says, the person who trusts in me is not only going to be able to do what I'm doing, but even greater things. Now, he says that this transformational leadership that he wants to transfer to you and me is based on 2 things. One is we trust in him, the person who trusts in me. And secondly, we are transformational leaders by doing what he did. In fact, he said, if you'll do the things that I did, you can do even greater things. So he's saying, trust me, receive me, let me come into your life as your Savior, and then take action, apply, take your gifts and go use them to change the world. Now, there's another scripture verse I want you to see because this just is huge. It's Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. Here's what Paul said. God can do anything. You know, far more than you could ever imagine, guess, or request in your wildest dreams. I know it worldwide. We talk to you about dreaming big and what is your dream? And What do you really want to accomplish with your life? And this passage of Scripture says God can do anything. Far more than whatever that biggest dream is, far more you could imagine, guess, or request in your wildest dreams. And he does it not by pushing us around. He doesn't like control you and dictate to you, but by working within us, his Spirit deeply and gently within us. In other words, this incredible promise says this. What's your greatest dream? What's the biggest thing you would like to accomplish? Whatever it is, God's able to do far more than you can ever think about or dream about. And how does he do it? He does it not by working outside of you, but by working inside of you, gently helping us to become transformational in our leadership. I call that verse the God room verse. And the God room verse is just simply this. It's the space between what I can do and what God can do. You see, here's the way this works. When I hit the top of my potential, I'm at the ceiling of my strengths and potential, and I'm as high as I can go. My ceiling for me and everything that I can accomplish is God's floor. When I have come to the end of myself, that's where he picks it up. And he has this God room to take me higher than I've ever been before in my life. This God room is unlimited. He said, anything that you ask. This God room is staggering, far more than you could ever think, imagine, or guess in your wildest dream. This God room is personal. It's a work that he does within you. It's a work that he does within me. Wow. Jesus, the transformational leader, who saw things others did not see, said things others did not say, believed things others did not believe, felt things that others did not feel, did things that others did not do. After we're in awe of who he is, he looks at us and says, you can even do greater things than this. By trusting in me as your Savior, and by doing then the works, taking action, using your gifts to add value to people. I feel today here in Hawaii, I feel today that there are many of you would like to step up your leadership. You already are learning how to lead in worldwide, but you would like to become a transformational leader. You would like to be able to touch people and see people's lives incredibly changed. My friend Paul Sika is going to come forward now. And he's going to invite you to come forward. And he's going to invite you to receive this Jesus, this transformational leader. And when you trust in him and ask him to come into your heart, he's not only going to do that today, but then with obedience, if you say, I'll do your work, God, he'll help you to become transformational. Your life will be changed so that you can change the lives of others. So as Paul leads us in this part of the invitation, I want you to come forward and trust in this Jesus. And today, not only accept him as your Savior and your Lord, but today, take the first step in being a transformational leader. Lesson number 13. Lesson number 13 is my father taught us to manage our gifts that God gave us, to steward our gifts. Stewardship means management. And there was a scripture my dad quoted to me. If I've heard my dad say this once, I heard him say it 1,000 times. Whomsoever much is given, much shall be required. In other words, he'd say to me, John, if you're given a lot of talent, the requirement is you got to really take that talent and make the best use of it. Help people with that talent. You've got to work the talent you have. If you're given a lot, you're expected to produce a lot. And he would teach us the parable of the talents. And talents are different. They're varied as far as types and sizes. But he'd say, whatever God gives you, that gift, that talent, that skill set that you have, whatever it is, he would say you've got to manage it well. You've got to work it. You've got to build it, multiply it, use it to help people. And it was an incredible teaching in my life. And so what my father did is he helped us find our strengths. This was way before Marcus Buckingham and Strength Finders. No. This book wasn't even written. But my dad knew that where our strengths were, those were the gifts that God gave us. And he also knew that where our strengths were, that should be that those strengths fit our purpose in life. And he very early looked at my brother Larry and helped him get started in the business because he had business gifts and a business mind. I can remember him telling me one day, he said, John, he said, I don't think you're going to be like your brother. Well, of course I wasn't going to be like my brother. My brother throughout school had part-time jobs. By the time he was 16, he had money to buy his own car. I didn't have any jobs. All I was doing was playing games and having friends and you know, I didn't want a job. It interfered with my all of my friendships. And so but I was good with people. And I can remember my dad said, John, I'm not sure what you're going to do, but you need to work with people. You're good with people. People like you. You like people. So let's do something in the people business. My sister, who's a nurse, had a desire to learn about medicine. My father was very wise. He said, okay, let's find out what you're good at now. And let's manage it well, and let's practice it, and really see if this is something that you're good at, because you want to always stay in your strength zone, not your weak zone. And so Dad really kind of gave us a head start. We had a head start over a lot of kids because he already had us programmed to find our strength, and it was interesting. He would say, and when you find your strength, don't do anything else. Don't get distracted. He was kind of a one person, one thing I do kind of a man. And so when he'd find somebody that was really smart, I mean, in other words, they could do a dozen things well, he'd kind of always feel sorry for him because he thought, now, which one are they going to pick? Because he wanted us to focus, pick one rabbit, stay right in that lane. So, but he taught us to steward our gifts. Boy, another lesson, huge lesson that we learned from my dad was to live a generous life. I shared with you in the last tribute lesson, my father taught us about tithing. And that's just a great principle. Again, whether you're a person of faith or not, if you set aside time and financial resources to help people and give to others, it's an incredible practice that will benefit others, but also benefits you. And so my father was very, very, very generous, and he did much more than tithe, but that's how he taught us. In fact, when we were kids, I can remember when we got $1 allowance as kids, and he would give it to us in dimes. You know why? He'd give us 10 dimes and say, now let's talk about this. What do we do with these 10 dimes? And we'd pull out the first one and we'd say, this is God's. He said, that's exactly right. First 10, God gets. And my brother one day, when we went to church on the way home, my brother looked at Larry, looked at Dad and said, Dad, I didn't give a dime in church today. And Dad said, you didn't? He said, no. He said, I gave a quarter. And I said, well, that's wonderful, son. You gave a quarter? Now, my brother would be at that time, 7, 8. He said, you gave a quarter? That's wonderful. He said, why did you give a quarter instead of a dime? And from my brother's childhood lips, he said, Dad, he said, God's been good to me this week. And I just felt that I wanted to give him a little bit more than what I usually do. Well, my brother gave a quarter that day. But God has blessed him as a businessman, and throughout his life, he's given millions of dollars to people in need and causes that are worthy. And he's a river. He's not a reservoir. He doesn't hold his resources. He lets them pass on. He learned that from Dad. In fact, after my father passed away, my brother, being the businessman, went and began to look at all of his financial records. And my dad kept very good financial records. And he began to, just kind of make sure everything was in order. And he called me on the phone and said, John, I've just spent a few hours going through Dad's giving and records. He said, it's pretty amazing. He said, my father never had a lot of money, but my father was extremely good with money. So we never had needs because he managed money very, very well. And he had an income level that he needed to have to take care of all those needs, and then everything above it, he wanted to be generous and give to causes that were very important in his life. And so he had annuities. He was always talking to us, as he grew older about it. He was, had an annuity here, he had an annuity over there. And again, he never made a lot of money, but my brother called me on the phone just after he passed away, and he went through his books. He said, John, he said, I've just gone through Dad's records, and I believe Larry said that just in annuities alone. This isn't other giving. This is just in annuities. And of course, he had annuities with some of these nonprofit organizations, so that financially he received a little bit of benefit from that money until he died. Then, of course, they got all the money, but they got all the money. But he had given $294,000. Just in one area of his giving. That's just one area. That isn't all of his giving. That isn't even the majority of his giving. And he just taught us to be generous. It's that principle of my hand clenched tight. If I'm not a generous person, and I'm holding on to everything I have, and I don't want anybody to have it, and I don't want to lose it. Oh my, I have a scarcity mindset. Well, the good news is if I hold it in my hand, I'll probably keep it. But the bad news is if something comes by my hand that could resource me or add value to me, supply me with things I need, because I am so tight and so stingy and so scarcity mindset, I won't open up my hand to receive more that I could have because I just have to hold on to what I have. And so think about it like this. If you have a clenched fist in your mindset, all the blessings that come by, you can't open your hand, because you open your hand, you're afraid you're going to lose what you got. But instead of a clenched fist, if you just have this right here, you just have this mindset, it comes in, it goes out. What I've been given, I should pass on. I'm a river, not a reservoir. God will only give to me what he knows will flow through me. Now, if I have an open hand, guess what? When the blessings come by, the opportunities come by, I have a hand and fingers. I can take some of those. But when I take them, I don't take them to keep them. Remember this: it's a catch and release program in giving. Just like you catch and release for fish, when it comes, you catch it and you have it and hold it, and then you prioritize it. Where's it best going to go? And then you release it. My father taught me to just live an incredible, generous life, and I'm just grateful for that. Wow. Another thing Dad taught me was to give God the credit. What he taught me well was the fact that that God is the source, and he taught all of us as children that every good and perfect gift comes from God, and so that you have to understand that I'm not the source, God is the source. This is a total different mindset, and the moment that I understand that, I now realize that he gets all the credit. This principle was taught to me greatly by my father and then by my mentor, Fred Smith, who one day when I was 34, 35, I was pastoring, had the 10th largest church in America, just a kid. And so he spent the weekend with me, and we had Sunday lunch after all the services were over. And he sat down with me at the Brigantine Restaurant in La Mesa, California. He said, John, I want to talk to you about your gifts, the gifts God has given you. And he said, this is a life-changing lesson. And he taught me the fact that the gifts that God has given me are greater than me. He said, first of all, they're not yours, they're his. They're called gifts. You didn't earn them, don't deserve them. God, in his care for you, in his purpose for you, gave you those gifts. He gave them to you. You don't deserve them, you didn't earn them. And by the way, if he wanted to, he could take them away from you. They are gifts. That's why they call them gifts. And he shared with me that since that they are gifts, I was like my dad taught me so I was to steward them and manage them well. And that's how I would multiply my gifts, by stewarding them and managing them well. And then he said, John, when people come to you
And they will, and they'll tell you you're amazing because you are amazing because you have these gifts. He said, I want you to understand you're not amazing. It's your gifts that are amazing. They don't realize it. They're complimenting you because they don't separate you from the gifts, but they should. Because he said, I know you, and you're not that good. And so they see the gift activated in your life, and they think, oh, you're amazing. He said, John, you're not amazing. In fact, he said, you're one step from stupid. I'm one step from stupid. We're all one step from stupid. He said, it's your gifts that are amazing. So he said, when people compliment you, realize what they're really doing is they're complimenting God. They're seeing God work in you through the strengths and the gifts that you have. And so he said, when they compliment you, pass it on to him. Don't try to hold it. Don't try to say, oh, well, yeah, I guess I am amazing. No, don't do that. What you keep, you lose. So just pass it on. And even to this day, when I speak and I'm done and thousands of people have heard me and they're on their feet giving me a standing ovation as I wave to the crowd and go off the stage, I look at God and say, they're applauding you. They're not applauding me. I just happen to activate the gift that you gave me. You just always understand he's the source. Here's what I want you to know. If you know he's the source, you'll always give him the credit. The moment you get confused and think it all begins with you, you'll start wanting credit for yourself, and that just causes all kind of leadership train wrecks. Give God the credit. Another thing that my father taught me to do was just to love people. And in all the lessons I'm giving you, they're all products of loving people. I mean, when I talk about adding value to people, that traveling the high road, encouraging others, the things I'm giving you here, walking slowly through the crowd, live a generous life, all these lessons that I'm teaching you right now from my father, they really are, bottom line, all about loving people. Loving people. And so my father lived it and did it so well. Let me give you another lesson my father taught me, and that was to love and read God's word. Okay, we're on faith, but I've got something really good for you. If you're not a person of faith, you hang with me here on this because I got something I want to share with you that really help you. Now, my father read the Bible every day. In fact, he read through the Bible, hang on to your seatbelt, 87 times. I'm so amazed by that. Trust me, I'm not ever going to get close to that kind of a number. But he just loved to read God's word because he felt that that's how God basically spoke to him. In fact, I've held his Bible where every time he read it through, he would make another mark and date it. And on the inside, the front it's a tattered Bible, but boy, all the times that he's read through the Bible. Now, you say, well, John, I'm not a person of faith. How does that fit me? Well, I can tell you how it'll fit you. I can tell you exactly. Let me just say something about God's word. Whether you're a person of faith or not, it works. And it'll work in your life. In fact, I'm going to give you the proverb challenge, okay? Proverbs, a book of wisdom written by Solomon, has 31 chapters. Not big chapters. I don't know. How long does it take you to read a chapter? A minute? Okay. Short chapters. I would like to give you the proverb challenge, whether you're a person of faith or not. Doesn't matter, because these principles work. I would encourage you to spend 1 month, 31 days, taking and reading one proverb a day. Just one. A minute, 2, max. You're done. I'm going to make you a promise. If every day you'll read one proverb for a month, 31 proverbs in total, I promise you, if you'll read it, and if out of that proverb you get a good business thought, or a good life thought for living, or a good leadership thought, or a good relationship thought. In other words, as you read it, if there's something you read and you say, oh, that's good, that'll help me, just kind of mark it. Here's my promise. In 1 month, you will have more thoughts, ideas, principles in leadership, life, business, relationships in 1 month by reading one proverb a day, it'll be the most productive idea, principle month that you've ever spent in your life. I guarantee it. I know that for a fact because I've been given the Proverbs Challenge out for, I don't know, maybe 3 decades, and I've had many people come back to him, people that weren't even of faith. They didn't even have a Bible. They had to go get them a Bible, okay? And by the way, if you go get one, go get the Message. It's a paraphrase. It's easier to read. Get the Message. And they said, and then they didn't even know where Proverbs were. They had to, go find Proverbs. It's kind of in the middle of your Bible, okay? But just start reading it, and it will. I promise you, it will change your life. Change mine. It will change yours. Another lesson my father taught me is to be intentional. That's where my book Intentional Living comes from. My father realized again that good intentions had to be turned into good actions, and so most people, they don't lead their life. They're not intentional. They accept their life, and when you accept your life, you don't get the best that life has for you. You've got to be purposeful. You've got to be willful. You've got to be focused. And one of the principles, one of the things Dad taught me is that every night he would, just on a 3x5 card, he would write down the 3 or 4 most important things he needed to do the next day. And he would put it. He would put it on his desk, and the next morning he would pick it up and put it in his pocket, and he'd just follow those 3 or 4 things that he needed to do that day. He was intentionally. He just understood. He said, "Son, if the night before you think through your next day," he was always preparing. When I wrote the book, Today Matters, or Make Today Count, as it's called today. When I wrote that book, I talk about the fact that we're either repairing or preparing. If we don't live today right, if we're not intentional on today, if we don't prioritize today, what we do tomorrow is we repair what we didn't do yesterday. We're in a repairing mode or lifestyle. But if we prepare, if we do live intentionally like Dad did, and every night kind of get your list so you're ready for your next day with your priorities, if you prepare, you don't have to repair. But I can tell you, you will repair if you don't prepare. That's just an absolute fact. And I learned that. I learned that from my dad. Just to live intentionally in my life. I just love that. And I wrote a book on it. And I learned it from my father. Another lesson that I learned from Dad was to see the best in others. How many times my dad would say, "John, there are basically 2 sides to every person that you know." And then he'd say, "There's 2 sides to me. There are 2 sides to you." And he'd say, "John, you've got a good side and you got a bad side. And you got this side of ideals and dreams, and then you got this human side that falls way short of those ideals and dreams." He said, "So when you look at people, what you look for, what is what you'll see. So if I look at you and I look for your faults, guess what? I'll see your faults. I'll see the downside of you. And if I see the downside of you now, he said, what will happen is what you look for is what you see, and what you see is how you treat people." Wow, this is incredible teaching. This comes from my dad. That's why I'm giving a tribute to him. That's why I'm passing it on to you. This is life-changing stuff. And by the way, I'm just going to stop and say, I hope you just aren't with me watching this and learning these lessons by yourself. Think about parenting for a moment. Now, this is on lesson 3 of tributes to my father, so I'm a little late, but these are the kind of lessons you need to sit down with your children and watch together. I mean, take it home with you. Sit down and say, you know what? For 30 minutes, 32 minutes, we're going to listen to John just teach some lessons from his father, and let's learn them ourselves. This is a time to share with others. My dad was a master at that. If he went to a conference, he'd take me out of school. In fact, he'd tell the teacher, "I'm going to educate him today." And he'd sit beside me and we'd take notes together. "What did you learn, son?" And he understood to expose me to these great principles. These 4 lessons now, 4 lessons on tribute to my dad. Oh my goodness. Don't hold them for yourself. Teach them to your staff. Sit down and watch them together. You know, make sure these are life-changing principles and lessons that'll just absolutely do the best. And so my father said, John, see the best of others. In fact, here's what he would say. If you see the best in others, you'll bring out the best in others, and you'll receive the best from others. Just as if you see the worst in others, you'll bring out the worst in others. Yeah. What you see is what you get. And what you see is based on who you are. We don't see people as they are. We see people as we are. We put them through our grid. We don't see life as it is. We see life as we see ourselves. The first person to kind of fix is me. If I can get me right, I'll see you right. If I can't get me right, to be honest with you, I'll probably see you wrong. If I can't get me right, I'll see life wrong. So my father just said, John, you know, you remember the three things that he gave me? I gave in one of my tribute lessons, you know, believe in people, value people, unconditionally love people. That's all in seeing the best in people, because when you see the best in others, you immediately begin, this is huge. You begin to immediately bring out the very best in others. And I just love that. I just think that is so helpful. Let me give you another one. We're doing so well today. I'm moving through these pretty good, and I'm feeling good because I won't get it done today, but I'll get the lessons done in 4 tributes to my dad. That's for sure. My father was so good on teaching me to maximize my gifts. I taught you in another tribute lesson that he taught me to steward my gifts, which was to manage them. Managing your gifts by doing the things that you do well consistently and not working on your weaknesses.